Shabbat with the singing of Yismahu. Please join us if you know it, and if not, join us on the chorus. It's easy.
Yismahu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismahu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Mekadesh shvi Shabbat, kulam yisperu v'itamru b'echa Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Uvashvi'i ratzikavo v'kidashto Shabbat. Chemnat yamim v'tov v'arat Shabbat. Hey! Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Zecher l'maaseh b'reishit Shabbat. Zecher l'maaseh b'reishit Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom. As you can tell, and Shana Tova. Happy New Year, 5,784. We are looking forward, as you can tell, to a day of inspired, spiritually uplifting music. Important words to come from our guest speaker this morning, Denise Lieberman, and just a time to share life together on this first day of Rosh Hashanah. You should have all gotten one of these. This is a reading that we got from the prayer book Sharei Zahav, which is Golden Gates. It is the queer synagogue in San Francisco, and our past president, Win Bagan, was wonderful and kind enough to bring me the Siddur as a gift, and this reading in a way has become our own. It says much about who we are and who we aspire to be, even if we don't always reach what it says, but it's certainly who we want to be. So with that, I ask you to join me as we read responsively. Here, when the world is about to crush me with all of its weight,
I find safety here.
when people have been too cruel because of their ignorance,
I find compassion here.
when my government tries to silence me,
I find my voice here.
when I feel a sense of helplessness during these uncertain times,
I find peace here.
when I am lost and tossed about in the day-to-day maze of activity,
I find direction here.
when loneliness slowly creeps into my life like the evening mist,
I find community here.
when I feel isolated at times,
I find comfort here.
when friends seem nowhere to be found in the daily grind,
I find good friends here.
when I sometimes lose sight of what I can do for the community,
I find purpose here.
when I feel that my family is scattered hundreds of miles away,
I find the nearness of family here.
when the cacophony outside is too much and I need to be soothed,
I find beautiful music here.
when I run around and take the simple things for granted,
I find meaning here.
when I am gone and left only my name.
I know that I will be remembered.
Continue the service on page 117. From the words of Maimonides, all year we should see ourselves as though we are equally balanced between merit and guilt. And similarly, we should see the entire world as equally balanced between merit and guilt. One moral failure can tip the scales for us and for the whole world toward the side of culpability, leading to destruction. But doing one mitzvah can tip the scales for us and for the whole world toward the side of merit, leading to redemption and deliverance for ourselves and for others. So the book of Proverbs teaches, a righteous person is the foundation of the world. That is, a person who has done what is right has tipped the balance for the entire world toward merit and saved it. And because of this, it is Jewish practice to give tzedakah generously, to increase acts of goodness, and to focus on performing mitzvot from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur more so than during the rest of the year. Continue on page 122 with prayers from Birkot HaShachar, our morning blessings. Pure God is the soul you gave me. You formed it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me. You keep it safe within me. Someday, when the soul returns to you, I will find a place in eternity. But as long as the Spirit breathes within me, I place before you my thanks. Eternal my God and God of my ancestors, creator of all creation, sovereign of all souls, Baruch atah Adonai asher b'yado nefesh kol chai v'ruach kol basar ish. We give praise, Adonai, all life is in your hand and in your care, the soul of every human being. Continue from Pesukei to Zimra, the Psalms of Praise, page 130. Baruch Shamar v'haya olam, Baruch hu, Baruch oseh v'reshit, Baruch omer v'yoseh, Baruch ozer kayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch mishalem zachar tov l're'av. Blessed is the one who spoke the world into being. Praised is God. Praise the one who is ever creating. Praise the one who creates with a word. Praise the one whose vision is made real. Praise the one who loves the earth. Praise the one who loves earth's creatures. Praise the one whose worshipers know goodness. Praise the one whose life and being lasts forever. Praise the one who rescues and sets free. Blessed is your name, our sovereign. We praise you with songs of celebration. Your oneness is the life of the cosmos. Baruch atah Adonai melech mulal batish bachod. Blessed are you, Adonai. Your majesty is celebrated in songs of praise. Continue our service now. Ashrei, page 132.
Ashrei yoshvei betecha, od hallelujah selah. Ashrei yoshvei betecha, od hallelujah selah. Ashrei, ashrei, ashrei.
continue our service now on page 135, a psalm that we're pretty fond of here at Kol Ami. It extols the virtues of music as a way to communicate with God, and this particular tune is one we're pretty fond of as well. Psalm 150, page 135. Continue our service now from the middle of 138 through the top of 140, Hamelech.
צדיקים ברנאי, לישרים נאוות ההילה. בפי ישרים תתהלל, ובדברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש.
Continuing on 140, Uvmachalot Rivavot Amcha Beit Yisrael. Brina Yitpar Shimcha Malkeinu Bechol Dor Vahador. Yishtabach Shimcha Le'ahad Malkeinu. Baruch Atah Adonai, HaMelech Gadol Batish Bakod El Hadod Adon HaNiflaod. Habocher B'shirei Zimra Melech Elchei HaOlamim. continue, we rise for Chatzi Kaddish on 141, which will lead us into the Baruch Hu on 142. Yotzer or Uvareko Shechoseh Shalom Uvaread Hakol. Source of blessings, our eternal God, your power fills the cosmos, shaping light and creating darkness, making peace and fashioning all things. Please be seated. Continue on the page 145. The morning wind forever blows. The poem of creation is uninterrupted, but few are the ears that hear it. Baruch Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. Continue on 146. Love, abundant love, unstinting, our God, you have enfolded us in love. Tender compassion beyond all bounds, your precious gift. Our ancestors gave you their trust, and you gave them Torah, laws by which to live. For their sake, teach us as well, grace us with your guidance. Loving Father, merciful Mother of us all, grant us clear understanding that we may listen, learn, and teach, preserve, practice, and fulfill with love every lesson of your Torah. May learning your Torah light up our eyes. May our hearts embrace your mitzvot. Unite us in love and reverence for you, that we may never feel ashamed of our deeds. We have trusted in your great and awesome holy name. Now let us celebrate at last the joy of your salvation. Continue Havienu on 148. V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfod haaretz v'toholikenu kol memiyut le'omemiyut le'ha Artseinu, Ki Elpo El Yeshuodata, Uvanu V'chartam V'golom V'ashon, V'kerav Tanu, L'shimcha Hagadol, Selah Behemet, Lehodot Lecha, Uyachetcha, Uyachetcha Be'ahava. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema, page 150. Hafta, page 152.
Et Adonai Elohecha, V'chol levavcha, Uv'chol nafshecha, Uv'chol meodecha. V'hayu ha'dvarim ha'ele, Asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha bevetecha uvelechtecha v'derech v'shochbecha Uvekumecha Ukshartam levot al yadecha V'chayu letotavot beinenecha Ukshartam levot al yadecha V'chayu letotavot beinenecha
So the set of prayers that we are in the midst of now is known fully as Kriyat Shema, starting with the Baruch Hu. There are two blessings that we recited, one both to God, really blessing God for what God does for us. The first blessing is the God who creates, who has the power to create, and the second blessing is the God of compassion, who walks with us in our strife, mourns with us when we mourn, and celebrates with us as we celebrate. Then you have the Shema itself, and then we have paragraphs following the Shema. Ve'ahavta is the first of those paragraphs. The second paragraph on 154 through 156, we don't see often. This is like the only time, at least traditionally it's always there, but in Reform, Machzorim, and Sidurim, it's generally not there except now. And why? Because it describes, there's reasons you could attest to it, but the one I think that stands out is that it is a description of blessing and curse. Blessing if we do what we're supposed to do and following the mitzvot, the commandments, and curse if we don't, including whether or not we will get sufficient rain on our land to nourish us and give us the food we need. So this direct line of blessing and curse for our actions is something that people find a bit troubling. And on the bottom of 156, Rabbi David Teutsch has an answer to that, which reads as follows: what human action could result in the destruction of the rains, the onset of crop failure and famine, abuse of the ecosystem upon which our very lives depend? Today, in the light of our awareness of the human abuse of the environment, we recognize that often this reward and punishment rest in our own hands. Continuing on 157, love God with your mind, stay curious, open to questions, marvel at the wonder of what is. Love God with your heart, stay alive to suffering and joy, yearn for the world that could be. Love God with your strength, open your hands and give, work for the sake of what ought to be. Continue on 158, which is actually the third and last paragraph of the Kriyat Shema, about the fringes, the tzitzit that we wear, and the reminder, a behavioral reminder to do what is right. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael v'yarta alehem v'yasu lahem tzitzit al kanfeg divrehem ledorotam v'natnu al tzitzit kanaf patil techelet v'yalachem l'tzitzit uritem oto uzkartem et kol mitzvot Adonai v'yasitem otam v'lo taturu Acharei levavchem v'acharei nechem, asher atem zonim achareichem, l'man tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'ayitem kadoshim le'eloheichem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem, meretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem le'elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem Emet. Prayer for Redemption, Micha Mocha, page 164.
שבחוגלים לשמך על שפת היום יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו
Prayer for the Amidah, the standing prayer, we rise. Tzur Yisrael, bottom paragraph of 164.
Tzur Yisrael, kumat bezrat Yisrael, golenu Adonai tzavaot shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
Adonai svatai titaku fiagiti lateka. Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Amidah, page 168.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu
Magen Avraham Vezrat Sarah.
70.
מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים רופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים.
Continue on the top of page 173 with words from Rabbi Aaron Pankin. Our actions help us to live in such a way that when we suffer life's darkest depredations, we will always have ways of coping with them. Our actions may not change the ultimate outcome one iota, but they alter our attitude, bolster our ability to withstand challenges, help us to handle unavoidable misfortunes better, and see life's value amid chaos and dismay. We continue, Ununtana Tokef, page 174.
ונתן תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא ואיום. ובוא תנשא מלכותך, ויקון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו באמת.
In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal. You record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten. And when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself, for every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other. And so a great shofar will cry to Kiyah, a still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd, as a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff. You count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments. Page 178. Rosh Hashanah yikatehevun, uvyom tzom kippur yichatehemun. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? Rosh Hashanah yikatehevun, uvyom tzom kippur yichatehemun. Uteshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, me'avrin et ra'ah hagazerah. But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. We continue with Kedusha, page 184.
Kadosh, Kadosh, Adonai Tzevaot, Meloch ol haaretz, kevodo.
Adir, Adirenu, Adonai, Adonenu, Adir, Shimcha bechol haaretz.
Baruch kevod Adonai, Nitkomo.
Echad hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu, hu Malkeinu, hu Moshienu, vehu Yashmienu, berachamav le'anecho chai.
Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitzion, ledor vador, Hallelujah. Ledor
Please be seated. Continue now with Kadosh Atah, middle of page 192.
Kadosh atah v'nara shemecha v'neloha mibaladecha k'katuv v'yikbar na'etot b'mishpat והאל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
Please turn to page 195, and at the top of the page, let's read responsively. Why am I different from all others? I cried in my loneliness. But there are no two stones alike in all the universe of pebbles.
No two leaves on any tree are just the same, nor animals, nor birds, nor people.
Difference is the mark of the hand of the Creator, and evolution is God's handiwork.
Each of us is meant to be ourselves, and each people to be great in its own way.
We are different in a universe of differences, swimming in the moving waters of history.
We Jews want to be a warm current in an icy river. We want to create a climate for living things.
Let us have the courage to be thankful for our differences. Let us pray for strength to accept our obligations. Continuing on 196. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'yimotenu li'ev v'yavo v'yagia v'yareh v'ratzeh v'yishma yifkadeh v'yizacher zichronenu v'godenu v'zichron avotenu v'yimotenu v'zichron Yerushalayim ir kadshecha v'zichron kol amcha beit Yisrael lefanecha l'tva l'tova l'chein l'chesed u'rachamim l'chaim l'shalem b'yom hazikaron hazeh. Our God and God of the generations before us, may a memory of us ascend and come before you. May it be heard and seen by you, winning your favor and reaching your awareness, together with the memory of our ancestors, the memory of your sacred city, Jerusalem, and the memory of your people, the family of Israel. May we be remembered for safety, well-being, and favor, for love and compassion, for life and for peace on this day of remembrance. Zichnenu Ananai Eloheinu bo l'tova, eternal our God, remember us. Uvdenu vo livracha, be mindful of us and redeem us. V'hoshienu vo l'chaim, for a life of goodness and blessing, and let us say, Amen. Continue now on 201. And again, let us read responsively. May all be moved to serve you, praise your presence, bless your name, your splendor and your justice, sea and land shall then proclaim.
Let us seek your face at sunrise, in the darkness teach your ways. May your power and uniqueness be the essence of our days.
When we speak about your glory, when we praise you for your might, those who hear will feel your presence turn from darkness to the light.
Let sea coasts burst exultant, hills embrace you with joyful sounds. When all people sing together, the world shall see your sovereign crown.
One theme for these high holy days is that of sovereignty, basically defining not so even much God, but who we are not. And part of that is the great Aleinu, the Aleinu Gadol. We rise, page 202.
L'Shabeach, l'Andon לצאת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות הנדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהן, וגורלנו אינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים עומדים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Continue on page 205. Rabbanu Shalom, power of all, have compassion on the souls of Israel. Open their hearts to do teshuvah before you. Open their souls for the sake of returning to you. Blessed are hearts that respond to the majestic music of the shofar. Blessed is the gift of life, the power of renewal that brings us to this day. As we enter the first of three of our shofar services, one is Malchiyot, the God of sovereignty, the second Zichronot of remembrance, and the third Shofrot, the wake-up call, the blessings for the sounding of the shofar, page 206.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher krishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam,
שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Shivarim Truah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Truah. Tekiah. Please be seated. God, who is ours and God of our parents, may our rest on this Shabbat bring you pleasure, lead us to holiness through your mitzvot, and may each of us find a portion of Torah that is ours. You bestow such goodness, teach us to be satisfied and to know the joy of your salvation. Let your holy Shabbat be our heritage, embraced freely and with love, and may all our people bring holiness to your name by resting on this day. Help us to serve you truly with purity of heart, for you are a faithful God whose truth stands forever. Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh ha-Shabbat v'Yisrael v'yom ha-Zikaron. Ritzei, page 209.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu E'amecha Yisrael U'tefilatom b'to'at v'kavel
So a quick remark on the sound of the shofar, and particularly the tekiah sound. It's a favorite lesson of mine. It comes from, derives actually from the Song of Devorah, the Song of Deborah, where it's really a celebration over defeating our enemy, and particularly the general who commands the forces of our enemy. At a certain point in the song, he is killed unceremoniously, actually with a tent stake. And in the Song of Deborah, it depicts his mother discovering that her son is not coming back, and she wails. And the wailing becomes the tekiah, the sound of the shofar. So the mother of our enemy is the basis for our sound of the shofar. We continue with a prayer that I particularly like, Modima Nachnu Lach on 2:10-11. It is a prayer of gratitude, a prayer of thanks. It is a saying in Midrash that when we hit Messianic times and no other prayers will be required, we'll still be required to recite prayers of gratitude. This is actually the Midrash I cited when I was ordained, and always want to be mindful and look for opportunities for gratitude awareness. So with that, on the top of 2:11, Modima Nachnu Lach, God, to whom we are grateful, let us show gratitude. Gratitude to our sages who toiled, to the one who chopped wood, to the one who raised cattle, to the storekeeper, the cobbler, and the one who sold salt, to the one who brewed beer, and the one who filled casks of wine, to the tailor, to the teacher, to the dealer in cotton, to the one who scrubbed clothing, to the keeper of vines, to the merchant of silk, to the one who plowed fields, to the builder of houses, to the doctors and scribes, to the blacksmith, to the tanner, to the digger of graves. Let us give thanks for a tradition that sanctifies work. Let us honor those who toil and sustain the world in noble and humble ways. We acknowledge those whose labor goes unnoticed. We praise the strength of their hands and the dedication of their hearts. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha u'lecha na'eh lehodot. Blessed are you, Adonai, whose goodness deserves thanks and praise. Continue now on page 214, Eloheinu.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu, barachenu b'bracha המשולשת הכתובה בתורה. Saronai, panav elecha, v'yosem lecha shalom.
Amen.
Our prayer for peace, Sim Shalom, page 216.
Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova u'beracha. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova u'beracha. Yalalai, yalalai.
Continue now. Please turn to page 223. A mainstay of our High Holy Day worship, Avinu Malkeinu. Let us read responsively. I'll read Hebrew, and you all read the English. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lifanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu V'Yalol Aleinu V'Tapenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Dera V'Cher V'Rav Me'Aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Kol Tsar Umastin Me'Aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kadvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu, Kiein Banu Maasim, Aseh Imanu Tzedaka V'Chesed V'Hoshienu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamal Aleinu, Ve'alol Aleinu, Ve'tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu,
As we begin our Torah service, I'll ask Brad Ordo to come up and join me at the Torah table, page 227. Ein kamocha ve'Elohim Adonai v'ein kamahasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'hador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom, av harachamim, heitiv avirtzoncha et Sion, tivneh chomot Yerushalayim, tivneh chomot Yerushalayim, ki v'cha levad batachnu, melech el ram v'nisa adon olamim. As the Torah is lifted, I'll ask everyone to please rise. Middle of 228. Adonai iti, unaroma shemo yachdav.
Lecha Adonai hagedurah v'hagevurah v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'ha'od, ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, lecha Adonai ha'mamlacha, v'hamikra ha'zeh levol l'rosh. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. הוא עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Seated. A yasher koach, thanks to Brad Ordo. We'll bring him back up to lift at the end, but he's got world's heaviest Torah here. I don't know how we got to that dubious honor, but we have it. So it's a schlep. So the Torah portion for this Rosh Hashanah Shabbos morning is from the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. It is really the story of Isaac as much as anything, but I'm cutting into a piece of the story that actually is more about Isaac's stepbrother Ishmael. But a couple of things, one about Isaac and one about Ishmael and Hagar. The Isaac piece is that Isaac, amongst the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Jacob, Isaac kind of gets short-shifted. He kind of seems to be the forgotten one, even seen, dare I say, as kind of a milquetoast. But he actually, in his own quiet way, is nothing but successful, underestimated. And there is something, and it kind of plays into what I talked about last night with the introvert, that Isaac seems to be a bit of the introvert, but when you really dig down deep, you discover some wonderful qualities and some ways that he contributed mightily, and that the progression of our patriarchs, matriarchs forward doesn't really progress without Isaac. The other piece is this, is through Sarah's jealousy, not her best moment, Hagar and her son Ishmael are sent out. Ultimately, what we know is a great nation is built after Ishmael as well as Isaac, and which is to say that on Rosh Hashanah, more than any other time and any other holiday in the year, the messages are universal. I have been known, I've had the honor of speaking in a number of interfaith circles, often being the lone rabbi, the lone Jew in the room, so the choice is easy if you want to hear anything about Judaism. But I always kind of introduce it the same way. And it's this, I say, of all the people in the world, God did not choose me to reveal ultimate truth. And, yes, is that like a yeah? I mean, of all the people in the world, I would be the least likely person. Maybe. That said, I have yet to meet that person. I said, do I think I'm right? I said, yeah, sure, I've been at this for a while. I feel pretty good about where we are in all this theologically, but that's just where a good discussion starts. So in carving out our Jewish path to reach a better place, we honor the paths taken by others to also reach that better place, even if it's not our chosen path. So with that, we will have a little bit of Torah. Ve'azor v'yagen v'shichosim bo v'nomar amen hakol avugaden l'nohunuvo chad la'Torah ta'amod hanafegi bat Eliezer v'lea rishon Baruch shenatan Torah Yisrael b'kedushato v'atem hadvekim b'adonai Elohechem chayim kolchem hayom. Lucky we know each other.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Elam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. Vayishma Elohim et kol hanahar. Vayikra malach Elohim el Hagar min hashamayim v'yomer la ko lecha Hagar el teri kol shama Elohim el kol hanahar v'asher hu sham kumi si et hanahar vaziki et yadayek bo ki legoy gadol asimenu vayikach Elohim et einecha V'tera bermayim, v'telech, v'tmalei et acham et mayim, v'tahash get anahar, v'yehi Elohim et anahar v'yigdal, v'yeshev b'midbar, v'yehi ravah kahashat, v'yeshev b'midbar paran, v'tikach lo imo, Isha Meretz Mitzrayim.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tocheinu Baruch Ata Adonai Notein HaTorah. Amen.
Continue now thinking about those who can't be with us due to illness. We wish them Rufah Shlema, Rufat HaNefesh, Rufat HaGuf, a complete healing, a healing of both spirit and body. The names of those we know of are up on the screen. I'll go around the room and point and ask you to call out the names of anyone else you know who's in need of a blessing of healing. Good, thanks. 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 Anna? Rise again, I'll ask Brad Order to come back up along with Win Began to lift and wrap the Torah. Vizot HaTorah is on page 246. As I introduce the Haftorah for this Rosh Hashanah, I'll ask Rod to come up and join me. The Haftorah is from the book of Jeremiah. I'm a fan. Jeremiah is my favorite prophet. Mostly because of, and it's not so much in this particular part of Jeremiah, chapter 31, but mostly because Jeremiah was one to call out the vanity of leaders who would come in and do ritual and then go out on the street and treat others, I was going to use a different word, I won't, poorly, with disdain. But Jeremiah was also someone who's got a reputation for being all bad news. And it's true that in Jewish prophecy, prophets tended to be a bad news buffet. Basically, who wanted this job? They had to go around and tell people what they were doing wrong and the awful things that would happen to them if they didn't change. And of course, they didn't change, and awful things happened to them. But he was also, and this is the part that's missed, was a prophet of consolation, a prophet that said, notwithstanding what you have done wrong and all that has befallen you, the consequences of what you have done, there is always hope. There is always the opportunity to turn toward good, always the opportunity for redemption. So with that, I will start with the blessings before the reading of the Haftorah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'Moshe abdo u'Yisrael amo u'v'nviei hamet v'tzedek.
Thus said the Eternal, a people, survivors of the sword, gained grace in the wilderness. Long ago when Israel was on its journey home, the Eternal appeared and said, with an everlasting love I have loved you. Indeed, with a love that is faithful, I draw you near. Once more I will build you up. Young maiden Israel, you will be made anew. Once more you will take your drum in hand and join in the dance of the joyous. Once again you will plant vines on Samaria's hills, and the planters will live to enjoy them. For a day is coming when watchmen will announce in the hills of Ephraim, arise, and let us all go to Zion, to the Eternal our God. For thus said the Eternal, cry out in joy for Jacob. Cry out in praise over the pinnacle of the nations. Sing and shout and say with voices raised, Eternal, save your people, the remnant of Israel. I am here to bring them back from the land of the north, to gather them from the ends of the earth, to the blind and the lame among them, women who are pregnant along with birthing mothers. They shall return here, a great community. With weeping they will come, with compassion I will guide them. I will bring them on a smooth path to brooks of water. They will not falter, for I have become like a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. To nations, hear the word of the Eternal. Declare it in the distant islands and say, the one who scattered Israel will gather them in and guard them as a shepherd does his flock. For the Eternal has redeemed Jacob and saved him from the hands stronger than his own. Happy the song when they reach the summit of Zion and bask in the glow of divine generosity. Grain, wine, oil, sheep, and cattle, they will be like a well-watered garden through and through, never again to languish. Then maidens will dance with delight, the young and their elders together. Their grief I will turn into bliss. I will comfort them and gladden them in their time of sorrow. The priests will have their fill of fatness, and my people, my bountiful goodness, declares the Eternal. Thus said the Eternal. A voice is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children, for they are gone. Thus said the Eternal, keep your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your labor shall have its reward, declares the Eternal. They shall return from the enemy's land, and there is hope for your future, declares the Eternal. Your children shall return to their land. How I hear Ephraim lamenting, you have disciplined me like a wild calf. I have been disciplined. Help me return, and I will return, for you are my eternal God. Now that I have turned back, I am filled with sorrow. Now that I am made aware, I strike my thigh in remorse. Ashamed and humiliated, I carry the disgrace of my early life. Truly, Ephraim is my precious child, my delight, and though I speak against him, I remember him with tenderness. That is the way my heart yearns for him. I will receive him back in love, declares the Eternal.
Blessings after the Haftorah, page 258. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzadik b'kol hadorot ha'el haneman haomer v'yaseh hamdaber umkayem shekol devarav emet vat tzedek neman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'nemanim dvarecha V'davarech ad midvarecha akor leyashuv rekam ki hamelech neheman v'rakaman ata baruch ata Adonai ha'el haneman b'kol devarav Rachem al Tzion ki beit chayenu v'laluvat nefesh toshia b'mhera v'yameinu baruch ata Adonai misameach Tzion b'vanecha Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu be'elahu hanavi abdecha uv'malchut beit David mishichecha b'mhera yavo ve'yagel libeinu al kiso le'yeshev zar v'lo yinchalu od acherim et kavodo ki v'shem kodshecha nishbata lo shelo yikben ero le'olam va'ed baruch ata Adonai magen David Al haTorah ve'al havodah ve'al hanviim ve'al yom haShabbat hazeh ve'al yom hazikaron hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'limnucha lekavod ultifaret Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umvarchim otak yitbarach shimcha b'fi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed Yivrakem et v'kayam la'ad baruch ata Adonai melech al kol ha'aretz mekadesh ha'shabbat ve'Yisrael v'yom hazikaron. So it has been now our well-embedded tradition that on Rosh Hashanah morning we invite in a guest speaker. We've done so because I think, more than for all the wonderful speakers that we get throughout the year, it says something about who we are by the speakers we bring in, particularly on Rosh Hashanah when there's a bit of extra attention on who we are and what we do. In the past, last year we had Emily Wells, the CEO of Planned Parenthood Great Plains. Before that, it was our Mayor Quentin Lucas. We've had leaders in the Muslim community, in the queer community, a leader for women's rights, the brother of our music director. All sorts of prominent, important people have come to the Bima to speak. And we've got another one this year. I collect heroes in a way. If they had, baseball cards for heroes, I would have them. Our guest speaker this morning is one of those. What can I say about Denise Lieberman? She's a nationally recognized voting rights lawyer, and I do mean nationally recognized, Director and General Counsel for Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. She has testified before Congress on voting rights, on the Voting Rights Act, a former director of voting rights at the Advancement Project in their national office in D.C. She is an adjunct professor of law at Washington University, where my parents met, so I hold that fondly in my heart. She is a member of Central Reform Congregation in St. Louis, and those who were on the board way back when remember that we made a little field trip for one Shabbos to Central Reform Congregation. I have said from time to time it's kind of who we want to be when we grow up. They're about 30 years ahead of us, so they got a bit of a head start. The other thing I noticed in kind of reading through Denise's bio is we have some shared interests. She loves cooking, music, particularly jazz, and we got to talk more about that, and traveling. And finally, what I will say about Denise is on every Monday at 10 o'clock, the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition has a Zoom meeting, pretty much every single Monday. It draws consistently anywhere from 80 to 120 people on this Zoom call, which in and of itself is incredible. But the thing you ought to know is that however many people are on, Denise introduces every single one of them and knows what each one does in the organizations they're connected with, which for that alone, you have my awe and gratitude and amazement. So it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Denise Lieberman.
Good morning and Shana Tova. It is, and thank you for that lovely introduction, Rabbi Albert. It is such an honor to get to share in Rosh Hashanah with you this year. It is a true honor to be invited, to be here, to be part of this beautiful service and the beautiful music. I really want to comment to the choir on just the beautiful service we've had here today. And I'm here to talk about why the fight for the right to vote is something we should be talking about on Rosh Hashanah, and why, as Jews, this is our call. And you might be a little anxious because, and I'd understand, you might be sort of sick of talking about voting rights. You may have noticed that we are in the midst of an existential crisis when it comes to our democracy. And it is one that is not only marked by assaults on our right to vote, but marked with a great deal of vitriol and that becomes so distasteful and difficult to traverse through. And it comes alongside attacks on our environment, attacks on our bodily autonomy, attacks on our LGBTQIA allies and friends and brothers and sisters, attacks on our schools, attacks on our curriculum, attacks on our workers who are fighting to put food on their tables and to care for their families. It's a lot. And for those of us who care about all those things, the weight feels very heavy. It is no coincidence that these assaults on all of our other rights come alongside the assaults on our right to vote. It is no coincidence at all. In fact, they are intricately connected. Because it is the power of our voice, which we exercise publicly through our vote, that allows us to speak up on behalf of those whose rights are being trampled upon, whose voices don't often get heard. And so whatever your issue is that you care about, it starts with the right to vote. And unfortunately, we are under assault right now when it comes to voting, often for political reasons, because silencing who can speak publicly has everything to do about quashing the ability of people to build power in their communities, to speak out against injustice. And those attacks have always started with attacks on the right to vote. But I'm actually here to give you a positive message today, because there are things that we can do right now. During these high holy days, this week, this month, and this year, as we head into what promises to be yet another very, very important, but also very vitriolic election year ahead. And I believe that we have an obligation as Jews to take on this fight. That as Jews and as people of faith, the faith communities have always played a critical role in this fight. We know that voting has always been a critical issue to Jews. Rabbis marched alongside Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in fighting and marching across that Edmund Pettus Bridge and fighting for the Voting Rights Act. We understand the power of our voice. And when people of faith speak out, we have the power to excise that political vitriol that is so exhausting and so uncomfortable and makes people just want to crawl under their bed and curl up in a ball. Because while voting feels like it's political and about politics, it's really not. Politicians make it that way. It sure seems that way in Washington. But the truth of the matter is, we have the power to elevate our fights beyond the political vitriol. This is not about Democrats or Republicans or whoever you want to get elected next year. The fight for the right to vote is at the core of what makes us Jews. It's at the core of our Jewish identity, that we believe in the basic human dignity of all people to be able to live their lives. Our faith tradition is rooted in tikkun olam, repair of the world. And we know, regardless of how you frame that, whatever the faith tradition you may come into this space with, whether you are speaking of the least of these, or building the beloved community, or tikkun olam, it is our job to make sure that those who are rendered voiceless are able to speak. It is a matter of justice, and it is a matter of dignity. It doesn't matter who you want to vote for. What matters is that everybody has a voice. Because when we do not, and when we silence, particularly silence, people due to their race, due to their class, due to their political values, we are contributing to the ongoing inequality that unfortunately has marked our nation. It's funny because we have a bizarre relationship with the truth when it comes to voting. We like to extol the virtues of our democracy, while with our other hand, keeping many people away from it and away from the table. As far back as 1886, the United States Supreme Court proclaimed in a case called Hicks that the right to vote is fundamental because it is preservative of all other rights, which sounds great. In fact, I believe that, truly. In 1886, and during the post-Reconstruction era, 10 of the 11 southern states rewrote their constitutions to enshrine literacy tests and poll taxes and moral character clauses, which are the forefather of today's felony disenfranchisement laws, to basically exclude African American men from being able to vote. A century later, in 1963, the United States Supreme Court proclaimed every voter is equal to every other voter. As students got on buses to go down to Mississippi for Freedom Summer and were murdered on that very first day of Freedom Summer in 1964, simply for having the audacity to try to register people to vote in the South. And we need to face that reality and face that history if we are to move beyond it, to really live those values and make them mean what they say. Unfortunately, we are in the midst of a backlash. Most of the history of this country is marked by a broadening, an expansion of the electorate, of who's allowed to vote. We know that when this nation was founded, only white male property owners could participate in the political process on the guise that they had a bigger stake in the community and knew best for everybody else. In those early elections, fewer than 5% of the population was eligible to vote. And over the years, we expanded that. As more and more people came to this country, opening the doors for people of low income. It used to be illegal for paupers to vote. And of course, we denied African Americans and other people of color the right to vote through the Chinese Exclusion Act, through slavery, and of course, women did not gain the right to vote until 100 years ago. But the last decade has been marked by a retreat and a regression. And it's up to us to take that back. 10 years ago this year, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision in a case called Shelby versus Holder that gutted a key provision of the Voting Rights Act that folks fought and died and subjected themselves to being beaten by police and state agents to try to obtain. And since that time, we have seen a decline of our electorate. The Supreme Court in that case proclaimed, basically, that racism was over. We had a black president, a black attorney general. We no longer needed the protections of the Voting Rights Act, which required jurisdictions with a history of discriminatory voting practices to have the government review those practices before they could be put in place to ensure that they would not harm communities of color. The ink wasn't even dry on that court decision when Gregory Abbott, then the Attorney General of Texas, implemented a photo ID requirement to vote that just the year before a federal court had found to violate the Voting Rights Act's prohibitions on racially discriminatory voting laws, finding that it disproportionately harmed African Americans and Latinos. The following year, 77% of the previously covered jurisdictions enshrined new restrictive voting rules that were targeted, as one court said, of the North Carolina restrictions, that targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision. I was honored to be one of the lead attorneys on that case out of North Carolina, and had the honor and privilege of representing Reverend William Barber and the North Carolina NAACP in that case. But we saw it all across the country, and even in states that weren't previously covered, like Missouri and Kansas. It gave a permission slip. And those who would seek to constrain the power of people's voices for political gain began enshrining restrictive voting rules all across the country. And that was before 2020, which added a multi-dimensional facet to this assault, coupled with disinformation and fear rooted in white supremacy and xenophobia. And following that election, which of course led to an attack on our nation's capital, a deadly attack on our nation's capital, to try and prevent the peaceful transfer of power, over 400 restrictive voting bills were then introduced in 2021. Another 350 or so in 2022, including right here in Missouri, which passed a massive omnibus restrictive voting law that limits access in dozens of areas by enshrining strict photo ID requirements to vote, criminalizing civic engagement organizations doing voter registration, even making it a felony, I kid you not, a felony, to direct someone on how to get an absentee ballot application. I'm proud to be part of the legal teams that are challenging those provisions in court. We did get the voter registration and absentee ballot provisions blocked preliminarily, and we go to trial in November, challenging the photo ID requirements to vote. Across the river in Kansas, we know that Chris Kobach exploited xenophobia by enshrining proof of citizenship requirements to be able to vote. Erecting barriers that make it difficult, disproportionately, for low-wage workers, communities of color, young voters, seniors, voters with disabilities, LGBT voters, to be able to make their voices heard. We have the power to turn this around by using our voices, by exercising tikkun olam, because literally the right to vote, as former Congressman John Lewis said, is precious, almost sacred. And we need to follow his lead and get into some good trouble, as they say, by standing up to zealots that would silence the voices of our communities, of our friends, of our neighbors. The people impacted by these laws are already the communities that face the greatest hurdles to having their voices heard. They're already the communities who are silenced in the public debate. They're already the communities who are cast aside. When I go to Jefferson City to testify on voting bills, things like photo ID, I often get asked, where are all these people that don't have the ability to get a state ID? They're people who face the same barriers to being able to vote. They're people who lack access to transportation. They're people with disabilities that can't get into a motor vehicle office. I took my 91-year-old mother last year to get a state ID because her driver's license expired. Has all of her correct information on it, her current address, everything, her date of birth, but because it's expired, she could no longer use it to cast a ballot in person. There was a step to get into the DMV office, and she's in a wheelchair now. Luckily, she's pretty tiny like me, and we were able to lift her up and over the platform while we waited on a Tuesday afternoon for 3 hours for her to be seen. Fortunately, I have the privilege of being able to go in the middle of the day to the DMV office. My mother has the good fortune of having me to drive her somewhere. I have a car. That DMV office isn't on a public transportation route. After Missouri passed its strict photo ID law last year, Kansas City, Missouri proceeded to close the only DMV office that was on a bus route. Even after those 3 hours, and even being with me, an expert on voter ID and what you need to get a state ID, which is quite a bit, by the way. You need to have a certified birth certificate or naturalization papers, proof of residency, proof of identity. I couldn't get one from my mother. And this is a woman born in 1931 who had her original birth certificate. Right? That's incredible. She's that organized. Handwritten birth certificate, really hard to read. It didn't have the name that she goes by. The name on her birth certificate says Mignon Ornstein. She's registered to vote as Joy Lieberman. She ran for office as Joy Lieberman. There is a school named after her. It's called the Joy Lieberman Learning Center. We couldn't create the paper trail of how she went from Ornstein to Lieberman after marrying my father. Because instead of a certified marriage license from the state, we had a copy of her ketubah. 1949 was when they got married in St. Louis. The staff at the DMV had no idea what to make of that ketubah. Said, I cannot read this. I have no idea what this is. And we had to leave empty-handed. And she's one of the lucky ones because she had access to those records. For people who might have to get those records from out of state, or for whom those records don't exist, or for where there are errors on those records. Sometimes people have to go to court to reconcile a typo or a variation in how their name is spelled. Those people aren't coming to Jefferson City. People who lack access to transportation, low-wage workers who would have to take a day off work without pay to come to our capital, or to even go to a DMV office, most of which close by 4:30 or 5 and often aren't open on weekends. You could start to see then the malaise and the message they are told, or the message they take home with them is, your voice is not wanted here. The right to vote is truly the root of all of our other rights. It is how we as a society say you count. Literally, we count you, right? And so when the right to vote is denied or abridged disproportionately to communities who have already been rendered voiceless What does that say to them? You don't count. You don't matter. And exacerbates a message that these communities have been getting all their lives. Missouri has cut education. Many schools are now down to 4 days a week. We don't provide access to health care. Missouri voters passed Medicaid expansion and our lawmakers took it away. We denied people access to basic services. And corporations continue to profit by exploiting the labor of underpaid and undersupported workers. And so I ask you today, as we embark on these high holy days, to make a commitment to yourself and your community that everybody does count, that everybody has the right to count, and that when we tell people that they don't count because of who they are, because of the barriers they face, that that is an injustice that we are obligated to remedy. I have a few suggestions of how you can do this. Today, this week, this month, and this year. Today, we are joined by Caitlin Adams at Missouri Jobs with Justice. I'm very proud to serve on the Worker Rights Board of Missouri Jobs with Justice, which has put forth an initiative petition in Missouri for healthy families and fair wages. This comes, no coincidence, right at the moment where our state legislature is attempting to block the ability of Missouri citizens to make their voices heard through that grassroots political process of the initiative petition. And we're not going to let that happen. So our friends with Missouri Jobs with Justice are out in the lobby, and you can sign a petition to allow this measure to be placed on the ballot. That's all it would do. Missouri law has pretty high standards. You have to get a lot of signatures by other voters. If enough people agree that a measure should be on the ballot, it gets on the ballot, and we get to vote on it. And if a majority of the people agree, it becomes law. That seems to have a ring of fairness to it, doesn't it? Lawmakers are attempting to make that process ever more difficult, almost impossible. Right in the moment where they are continuing to deny our workers fair wages and access to health care or paid family leave. That's what this Healthy Families petition would do. Over 200,000 Missouri workers lack access to any paid time off. If they're sick, if their children are sick, if their parents are sick. Leaving workers to have to make a choice of losing a critical day of pay or taking care of their children because they don't get sick days. This initiative would provide earned paid sick time off. It would provide health care and mental health support. It would increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Hundreds of thousands of workers in this metro area have to work multiple jobs, even be able to survive. The minimum wage keeps people below the poverty line, unable to provide care for their families. And so this would strengthen our families. And this is one way we can engage in Tikkun Olam. So please, if you are a voter in Missouri, sign that petition. Whether you are here from Missouri or Kansas, I will suggest another thing you can do. This week, on Tuesday, September 19th, is National Voter Registration Day. I have some materials out in the front about voter registration here in Missouri, but if you are in Kansas, this is a national holiday. Take a moment on National Voter Registration Day. Take a sticker that I have out there. We've got them in English and Spanish. Talk to your friends. Double check your registration. Make sure it's up to date. If you've moved, you're going to need to update it. Let's make sure that our neighbors, our community members, are registered to vote as well. Do you have students in your life? Do you have elderly relatives in your life, neighbors in your life? Make sure they're registered to vote. This Tuesday is a great day to do that. And this year, join this fight. Take a pledge as we enter the new year to be there, to help uplift the voices, because we can break through this morass and the vitriol that's out there by uplifting the basic human dignity of all people to have a say, have a voice. There's information out there on how you can join the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. I invite you to join our Monday calls. There are other groups working in Kansas as well. We run election protection. Missouri and Kansas run election protection hub together. So which side of the river you come from, there are many ways that you can engage. You can volunteer as little as 2 hours on Election Day for election protection, to stand in front of the polls and to talk to voters as they're entering, helping them navigate the unnecessarily burdensome rules and confusing rules that exist, and getting them in touch with an attorney in our command center right away. This is not about partisanship. It's not about who you vote for. It's about the basic human right of all of us to be able to have a voice and to speak our truths, because when we do, that is how we exercise dignity over ourselves, autonomy over ourselves, and gives us what I believe is our God-given right to determine our own destinies and our own futures. Thank you for allowing me to share in Rosh Hashanah with you today. Shana Tova.
I couldn't do better, so I won't try. We can talk more later. Just full disclosure, I'm also on the board of Missouri Jobs with Justice and their faith co-chair. So I got a little bit of a stake in the game. The hour is kind of late, so we're going to push on hard with the second of the 3 shofar services. This one's Zocher, to remember, God of remembrance. Remember the covenant of our ancestors. We affirm it today. Remember we are people of noble ideals. Help us to attain them. Remember all of your people, all the nations on the road to peace. Bless their efforts. Baruch atah Adonai Zocher Habri. Blessed are you, Adonai, who remember the covenant. You remember us. Page 268. Tikiyah. Shavarim Teruah. Tikiyah. Tikiyah. Shavarim. Tikiyah. Tikiyah. Teruah. Tikiyah. Page 276, we honor our Torah, we say is an Eitz Chaim, a tree of life. Yehalalu et Shem Adonai, ki nizkav shemo levado. continue with the third of the three shofar services, the shofrot. Much like Denise's wake-up call, a wake-up call for us for the new year. Baruch atah Adonai, Shemei Kol Truah Amo Yisrael Barach Amin. Blessed are you in our lives, Adonai. You hear with love the shofar, true voice of your people Israel. Tikiyah. Shavarim Truah. Tikiyah. Tikiyah. Shavarim. Tikiyah. Tikiyah. Truah. Tikiyah Gedolah. Shakah. Usually Dan is in tandem with John Greenwald. John Greenwald jumps out of town this year, but I'm sure this is the year you would have beat John. We rise for Aleinu, page 286. Kadisha Tome, Mourner's Kaddish. We observe the Yortzeit this coming week of Daniel Karp, father of Ellen Karp. I also want to make mention, I have the honor of officiating at my godmother's funeral this coming Monday. Florine Lieberman, of no relation to Denise, but just to say that there must be something in the name, because another woman who's speaks truth to power, who makes the world a better place. So I'm thinking of her on this Rosh Hashanah day. Anybody else observing a Yortzeit? Yeah, did. Okay, thanks, Mary.
This week is my father's Yortzeit, Larry Lieberman, and my uncle, Mo Ornstein, passed this month.
Okay, thanks. Kadisha Tome, Mourner's Kaddish 292, Yikadav, Yikadash, Shemei, Rabbah. Be'amad Yivrach Yirteh V'yamlich Malchuteh B'chayechon V'yamechon Uv'chayeh D'chol Beit Yisrael B'agalav V'zman Kariv V'imru Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Olamei Omaya Yitbarak V'yishtabak V'yipa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitalev V'yitalal Shemei D'Kudishah Brichu Leila Mikol Birchata V'shirata Tush B'chata V'nechamata Damiran Be'alma V'imru Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Oseh Shalom B'mromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'imru. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, please be seated. As I start announcements, I'll try and go through them quickly. Pat, if you want to come up and join me just as I do announcements, that would be great. Trying to compress the time here. I want to start with our musicians, with Brendan Howard, Jana Harris, Will Perry, Roberta Solomon, Lee Merrill, Karen Ingebretson, our shofar blower extraordinaire, Dan Steinell, and our flautist. Is it a flautist or flutist? It's Amber, and she's wonderful. I have saved the other two musicians because I have something to say about them. First, what's seeming like an unrelated story, but it's not. I'm sure many of you heard about the incident at the Overland Park Farmers Market wherein a lovely couple was selling goods of another person and discovered that on social media he was a raving anti-Semitic neo-Nazi, literally, Heil Hitler level neo-Nazi. They immediately told him to pick up his goods. They would no longer be selling them. He said, nope, I'm not going to do that, and they threw him out. They are honey farmers down in DeSoto, Kansas. Their name are Patty and Michael Rather. So in true Kol Ami Laura Steinell fashion, when she heard about this, it wasn't enough to send a note. She went down to their farm and bought honey. Every year at Rosh Hashanah, on Rosh Hashanah Day, on your way out the door, we give you a honey cake for a good and sweet year. You should know that the honey this was made by Faye Balk, as it is every year. You should know that the honey that went into the honey cake is the honey that Laura bought from the farmers who stood up against anti-Semitism. Which leads me to the other piece, which is this. So Patrick Buckley, the music director when I first came to the pulpit at Kol Ami, is here. He's here, which is, in and of itself, that's great. He's here for Laura. And the reason he is here for Laura is after years and years and years of service as our music director, she has announced that she will be retiring after Shabbos Hanukkah in December. She will continue to do a lot for Kol Ami, like going down to farms and buying honey, and I'm sure still a part of the music as well. Can you ever imagine a Kol Ami without Laura Steinell? We are grateful. There will be more honors to come, but I wanted you to know that Patrick came back, and will be back Yom Kippur to honor Laura and her work as music director. Again, our thanks to Denise Lieberman. I recall the saying that we all know from the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, which is, I think, improperly translated as justice, justice shall you pursue. I think the better translation is pursue absolute justice, which means we should have just tribunals and just people administering justice. That's Denise, and that's her fight. You should know also, she's the Missouri counsel for the lawsuit suing the state on their anti-abortion laws, which actually makes her my attorney because I'm one of the 14 plaintiffs on the case. So if I get a speeding ticket on the way home, I can call you. Thanks to our wonderful, wonderful board, our lay leaders who do so much to make this all happen, to Pat, to Ray Berger, to everybody, thank you so much. To our wonderful folks here at All Souls, Hallie Sylvester, Mieka Westra, the AV team, Anthony Edwards, our dear friend, Reverend Dr. Kendall Gibbons, and Reverend Aaron Dakahali. Thanks to Caitlin Adams, who's outside with Missouri, the executive director of Missouri Jobs with Justice. Coming up, it takes us about a half hour to get stuff put away and then head over to Brush Creek at Tice Park. I don't know if thank you, Dan, I was pointing in the wrong direction. It's that way, thank you. For Tashlik, remember we're not doing breadcrumbs this year. Put a pebble in there if you're throwing, or birdseed or something that doesn't harm the birds, which means if you're tossing pebbles into Brush Creek, don't hit the birds, please. Tomorrow morning at 9:30, back at the same Tice Park, we will do a very informal second day Rosh Hashanah service. It won't last long. It's just a chance for us to get together. We love it when Rosh Hashanah second day falls on a Sunday, and we can get away with that. Bring your own blankets, chairs, whatever will make you comfortable out at the park. Next Friday night, Shabbos Blessings on Zoom, 6:45. Look on the website or a newsletter for the schedule for Yom Kippur. I think that's all I have. Thank you. And Pat.
Well, as the hour is late, I am going to be very, very brief. Maybe I'll put what I was going to say in the newsletter, but there is one quote that I would like to read to you, and this was actually in the New York Times yesterday. It's a quote by Deborah Lipstadt, and she is the State Department's special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. And what she said was, we need to borrow an old phrase to accentuate the positive among our diverse cultures and shine a light on how Jews and anyone confronting persecution live rather than how they suffer. We need to embrace approaches that are Jewish by tradition, yet universal in their application, greeting each new moment with a prayer, gathering for each meal with a note of gratitude, reveling in the dynamic facets of our faith, not out of fear, but joy, whether it is a festival or an apple dipped in honey. So to close, I'm just going to ask you and thank those who have already donated, but we still need donations, and you can help us in big ways and small ways with any amount. There are donation envelopes on your chairs. You can go to the website and click on the button and donate. So once again, thank you, and Shana Tova Umiteka.
Pat, thank you so much for bringing important and eloquent words to our Rosh Hashanah Shabbat celebration this year. We will conclude our service now on page 294, Hayom Tamseinu.
Hayom Tamseinu. Amen. Hayom Tevarchenu. Amen. Hayom Tegadlenu. Amen. Hayom Tidrishenu Letova. Stifenu lo chayim tovim. Amen. Hayom tishma shavatenu. Amen. Hayom titvichenu bimin tzidkecha.
One more thing, if somebody lost a tallis clip, it was somewhere I think around the second row last night, come up, I have it for you. I probably could have used one myself. My shoulders are a little tallis challenged, you might have noticed. With that, a Shana Tova Umituka, a wonderful, good, sweet 5,784 Shabbat Shalom.